Rif Beitza, Daf Chav Ches Amid Aleph. Analyzing the Mishnah. The Mishnah ends with Chum Omrim Ein Mashgichen B'Chaf Maznayim Kalikar. The sages say you can't use a scale at all. So, my Kalikar, what does it mean? Not at all. Amr B'Yudam Shmuel. Afilu Shama Min Ha'achbarim. You can't even put the meat on the scale in order to guard it from mice. Amr Vidi Bar Avin. The who, the Talia B'Tvita, B'Pnei Yirish Kishokol Basar B'Yom Tov. What are we talking about here? Where the scale is suspended from the ring. For then it appears that he's weighing meat on Yom Tov because it looks like he's measuring it. Continuing the Gemara, V'ha Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi, and this that Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shimon, son of Rabbi, that they weighed one portion of meat against another portion. B'Yom Tov, they do this on Yom Tov. We don't paskin like them. But we rather paskin like the sages who hold that you can't use a scale at all. Continuing the Gemara. Amr Yehuda Shmuel, Tabach Uman Asur Lishkol Basar Biyad. A professional butcher who handles meat all the time, and thus when holding the meat he'll be able to tell how much it weighs. It's forbidden for him to weigh meat in his hand. V'yamar Yehuda Shmuel Asur Lishkol Basar B'Mayim. You can't weigh meat in water. And the way you would measure that is possibly by putting it into the water and seeing how much water is displaced or how much the water level rises. Amar Chia Barashi, Amar Rav Asur Lasos Beis Yad B'Basar. You can't make a handle in the meat. This means you can't cut a hole in the meat. And they're going to use this as a hold for the customer to hold on to as he carries it home. So Amar Ravina, Uviyad Trapper Dumbi. If he makes this hole by hand, so it is permitted. Amar Ravuna, Mutter Lasso Simin Bavasar. Ravuna says it's permitted to make an identifying mark in the meat. He had the Rabba Ravuna, Machtachla Atlas Karnasa. Just as Rabbi Ravuna would cut meat into triangular pieces. So much for the Gemara. Now on to the next Mishnah. In Mashchidin Sasakin B'Yom Tov, Aval Masiyal Gabe Chaverta. We may not sharpen a knife in its normal way, presumably with a sharpening tool on Yom Tov, but you can scrape it against its fellow knife. So you rub two knives together. Moving on to the next daf, the next amud for this Mishnah. Lo yomer adam l'tabach ashkali b'dinar basar aval shoftin m'chalkin b'neihem. A person shouldn't say to the butcher, "Wait for me a dinar's worth of meat," but they may slaughter and divide amongst them. Whereas the Rif has the girsa aval shochatin, and they may slaughter. The Mishnah in our Gemara has shochet, which would mean he, the butcher, may slaughter. So that was the Mishnah. Now on to the Gemara. Since the Mishnah, this was actually putting together two Mishnayos that we have in our Gemara, but the Rif considers it one Mishnah, so it spans two Amids. So we're going to go now to Beitza Chav Ches Amid Aleph again for the Gemara. The Gemara says, Man Tana Tashchaza Atzma Asura. Who is the Tana who says that Hashchaza, sharpening itself, is forbidden? Which our Gemara has a slightly different girsa, which is Mantana de b'mashchezes asura, that with a sharpening tool it's forbidden. But the intent is the same in either case. Amar Chisda de lo Rabbi Yehuda. This is not this Mishnah that says you can't use this mashchezes, so you can't do hashchazah atzma, is not in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda. This Sanya, because we learned in a brisa, in ben Yom Tov l'Shabbos al tzorach ochel nefesh bulvad. There's no difference between Yom Tov and Shabbos and the restrictions except for Ochel Nefesh, things you do for food. Rabbi Yehuda, he has a more expansive definition of what you can do. Rabbi Yehuda permits, he's matir b'machshivei Ochel Nefesh, even by the preliminaries of Ochel Nefesh. Amar le Rava Rav Chisda. So Rav Chisda, Rava said to Rav Chisda, who just said this, that this was not in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda, Should we now expound in your name that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda? So Amr Lei, Rav Chisda replied to him, Yehei Ra'ava, let it be the will, namely the will of Hashem. D'chal hanei milim al yisa, tzidrishun mishmi, that all of these most excellent matters are expounded in my name. Continuing with the Gemara, Amr ibn Nechemia b'Reid Rav Yosef. So he said, Hava ka'imna kamei de Rava. I was standing before Rava, and now we're going over to the next Amud, Beitza Chaf, Ches Amud Beis. So I was standing before Rava, and he was passing a knife over the rim of a basket. And I said to him, is master doing this in order to sharpen it, or in order to take away the residue that's on it? He said to me, I'm doing it to get rid of the residue. And I saw that his actual intent was he was really doing it in order to sharpen it, but he wasn't telling me the truth here. And this, that he didn't tell me that he was doing it for that purpose. Because he held this was the halacha, but we don't rule like that. What does it mean we don't rule like that? We don't rule like that in public for others to know, even though that's the true halacha. A similar story. Amr Abaye, I was standing in front of Mar, and he doesn't specify who Mar is. Usually this means Rava. This means Rava. But apparently, as ArtScroll points out, Rashba's Girsa has that he was explicitly standing Kamei de Rav Yosef. So it's one of the two. And I saw that he was passing a knife over the edge of a millstone. And I said to him, the same question, are you doing this in order to sharpen it or in order to remove the residue? And he said to me that it's to remove the residue. But I saw that his actual intent was to sharpen it. But the reason he didn't tell me is because he held that this was halacha, but we don't rule this way for the public. The Amar Rava, and our Gemara actually has instead of Rava, Rav Yosef said, Sakin she'amda, a knife which became dull. It's so dull that it can't cut in its normal manner. That is permitted to sharpen on Yom Tov. V'hani mile the paska agav duchka. This is where it can still cut when it's subjected to a lot of pressure. If you really push hard, you'll be able to cut. V'davka agav, and specifically via next page of the Rif. V'chayav agav dikla. Basically equivalent to the two cases cited in the Gemara, via a millstone or as a basket. Aval b'mashchezes la, but by a knife sharpener, this mashchezes that was mentioned beforehand, no. Darash Rav Chisda v'teimer Rav Yosef. Rav Chisda said, and some say it was Rav Yosef. This probably was a matter of a yud followed by a vav, looks somewhat like a ches. So you have a ches samach or a yud vav samach followed by a shmitik. So it could either be Rav Yosef or it could be Rav Chisda. So v'itema, I always say, means v'isema. There was another girsa that had Rav Yosef. So it's either Rav Chisda or Rav Yosef, who was Darash, who expounded as follows. Echad sakin shenifkema, the echad shepud shenirtzam, the echad glifas hatanur, banu l'machlokes Rav Yehuda v'Rabbanan. That's either a knife that became nicked, or a spit whose tip had broken off, or the shoveling out of an oven or a stove. All of this is on Yom Tov. We have come to the dispute of Rabbi Yehuda and the sages. Disnan, because they learnt, our Gemara has the Sanya, which would indicate a Brisa. Ein ben Yom Tov l'Shabbos ela ochel nefesh bilvad. There's no difference between Yom Tov and Shabbos except for this ochel nefesh. Rabbi Yehuda mativ machshirei ochel nefesh, and once again Rabbi Yehuda permits by these preliminaries of ochel nefesh. My time at the Tana Kama. What's the reason of the Tana Kama? Amar Kra hu vado yasa lachem. Hu v'lo machshirav. This is a citation from Shmos 12:16, where the pasuk goes, "V'yom harishon mikra kodesh, v'yom hashvi'i mikra kodesh yelachem, kol malacha lo ye'aseh v'hem. Ach asher yachal l'chal nefesh, hu v'ado yasa lachem." And on the first day there shall be to you a holy convocation, and on the seventh day a holy convocation. No manner of work shall be done in them, save that which every man must eat. That only may be done by you. So the pasuk again ends, Hu l'vado yasa lachem, and they're focusing on the word hu. That only may be done by you. So, hu v'lo machshirav. That and not its preliminaries. So that's the reason of the Tana Kama. Rabbi Yehuda Amar, l'cha, Amar l'cha, Amar kra, lachem l'chol tzarchechem. The pasuk ends again, hu l'vado yasa lachem. So we have this drasha of hu, but we also have this drasha of lachem, to you. So lachem, to you, is interpreted as for all of your needs, which would also include the preliminaries. So that was Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbanan. What about going back to the people who argue with Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbanan, ha'um vayile lachem below l'kusim, and possibly also lachem below l'chlavim. We had a drasha much earlier that this is only for Jews who are celebrating Yom Tov. So that's the reason for this exclusion on the general labor. And if it's not for somebody there that's enjoying Yom Tov, so then they're not within the exclusion. So you'd be violating the laws of Yom Tov. So this is lachem is not intended as a riboy in this case. It's not coming to include something, but it's actually coming as an exclusion of lachem below l'kusim, and possibly also lachem below l'chavim. This is the Gersa and the Rif. We might take it out. It depends on this whole machlokas we had earlier of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Aglili. But anyway, that's how the Rabbanon use that lachem. Rabbi Yehuda. So what does Rabbi Yehuda say? Haksiv hu. It says hu. So we have that drasha. So Amar L'cha to tell you, Ksiv hu, Ksiv lachem. It says hu, which is a miut, and Ksiv lachem, which is a riboy. V'lo kashya, and it's not a contradiction. Kan b'machshirav she'efshar lasos on Erev Yom Tov. These are for preliminaries it's possible to do from Erev Yom Tov, where it's then prohibited on Yom Tov. V'chan b'machshivin she'efshar lasos on Erev Yom Tov. And here, where it's forbidden, is here where it's permitted is where it's impossible to do it from Erev Yom Tov. Continuing with the Gemara, Ibayolu, they asked her, it was a question to them, Mahu l'harasakim l'chacham. Can you show a knife to a chacham? This is if you had a knife that might have gotten nicked and you want to know whether you can shecht with it. So you would need to show it to an expert who could tell you whether this would validate the shechita or not. So can you show this sakin to a chacham? So one of them permits and the other one forbids. The Bahag explains that this is talking about time of the milsa. You might go outside of the tchum in order to show this to the chacham, which is somewhat problematic because tchum Shabbos and tchum Yom Tov we would generally assume is D'Rabbanan. So to make a gzeira to protect the Rabbanon, it's somewhat strange, and so we'll see the Ram there for a discussion. Continuing with Gemara, Amar Rav Yosef, Talmud Chacham Rola Atzmo Umashila Achavim. A Torah scholar can inspect the knife for himself, and then he could lend that knife to others. And assuming we're taking the explanation of the Bahag, there's no problem of him going outside the tchum to show it to himself. So he's a good exception to this whole general case. Okay, the next Gemara continues. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Shvod Nirtzaf Asur L'Sakno B'Yom Tov. A spit. This is Rav Yehuda said to Shmuel. A spit which became bent. It's forbidden to fix it on Yom Tov. The Afal Gav de Pashat Le B'Yadeh. And even though it can be straightened with his hand. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Shevot Shetzalu Bo Basar. This is a spit which you used already to roast meat, and you don't have other meat that you're going to roast. So it was okay to move until now, but Asher L'Taltalo B'Yom Tov, now it's forbidden to move on Yom Tov. Rav Malkiel, the Tema, Rav Ada Bar Ava. So Rav Malkiel and some Girsaos have Rav Ada Bar Ava. So in fact, if you look at our Gemara, we have a different Girsan than this. We have Rav Malkiel, and some we have Rav Ada Bar Ava cited Rav Malkiel. So in other words, it's Amar Rav Malkiel, Amar Rav Ada Bar Ava. And if you look at Bach, actually, based on other Girsos and other Gemaras, reverses it and has Amar Rav Malkiel, Amar Rav Ada Bar Ava. So we have these three different Girsos, and I would claim this is actually an instance in which you can see how an Itema is Ema. There are that say how this Itema comes about, because it wasn't clear which one it was, and so apparently in various Girsos one of them dropped out possibly. So it's citing different Girsos. So Malkiel Itema Rav Ada Bar Ava. Amar Shomto Manicho B'Keren Zavis. You can slip it out, you can move it away from where it is initially, and put it in a corner out of the way. Amar Rav Chia Bar Ashi Amar Rav Huna. V'hu sheyesh lo kazayis basar. This is so long as there's an olive's measure of meat still stuck on that spit. Ravina Amar Afilu Ein lo kazayis basar. He says even if there is no olive's measure of meat, so it's shari, it's permitted. Midah have a akot brishus harabim. Just as is true regarding a thorn in the public domain, where a thorn in the public domain could be dangerous. So you could move it away. So too here you can move this spit out of the way from where it might injure somebody. And we paskin like Ravina.